Welcome to the Pop Cult Podcast. Here are your hosts, Ariana and Seth.
This is the Pop Cult Podcast. I'm Seth.
I'm Ariana.
And today we will be talking about two new films. We will be going into our thoughts on the recently released film, How to Blow Up a Pipeline. But first, we're going to be talking about Scream 6. Would it have been last Halloween we watched through all of them, or was it the previous Halloween?
I
think it was last Halloween, because
I
the
think
previous one we did all the Halloween movies.
Yeah, like we were not in the place that we're staying at right now.
So last October we watched, we'd already watched and reviewed Scream. So we started with Scream 2 and worked our way up to the Legacy sequel that came out. And so now we've decided to watch Scream 6, the continuing adventures of our new protagonist, Sam Carpenter, and her sister. So in this movie, the four survivors of the most recent Ghostface murders leave Woodsboro behind for a fresh start in New York City. However, they soon find themselves in a fight for their lives when a new killer embarks on a bloody rampage. So Ariana, what did you think of Scream 6?
Highly forgettable. It's one where it's always like on the edge. I was gonna say blade edge. But on the edge of maybe being interesting, but then it's just sort of like, but we have a whole trope that we have to follow, so we can't go that route. And this one was supposed to be like a bit more dark and brooding, and
they all are.
There's obvious an understanding that like Jenna Ortega is a bigger hit than they anticipated, so they're like, we need to make her a bigger character than last time.
Because in the first movie, she got sidelined in the hospital for a big chunk of it, and she had some like great pieces, but she was definitely a supporting character to Melissa Barrera's Sam.
Yeah,
but now they're like on equal footing in the movie.
Yeah, like I'm not saying that Jenna Ortega can't act, but there are times where she's really stiff.
She's the most boring Disney Channel actor. I mean, they all are boring off that channel, but like she just exudes that level of energy.
Yeah, where there are times where it's sort of like the times that she's acting against Melissa Barrera, like there are times that you could tell like she's relaxed, so she's playing into the little sister trope very well. And then other times it's sort of like when she is against other people, it's as if like she's still a little bit stiff, so it gets really hard to watch because you're kind of like she's seesawing a little bit, and it's hard. And it's not saying no, it's hard to watch her. It's sort of like, oh, I wish. And it's like, again, I don't expect the directors of these films
the material she's given is not great.
Yeah, and so they don't get a lot out of her. And then like, well, unfortunately, like Sam is such a boring character.
The only thing about Sam that is interesting is, and spoilers if you really give a shit about Scream, is that she is the daughter of Billy Loomis. That's it. And so they constantly are like, is Sam gonna become a killer like her father in the first Scream movie? And it's sort of like, I anticipate there's going to be a third movie, I'm sure, in this new series. And the thing is, the next movie better be the one where like we pay that off and then we end it. Because I don't really know where else to go, because this movie really showed how tired the Scream like subversion trope has become at this point, where it's comical now.
Yeah, like, okay, so they have this weird thing that like Sam is upset that her sister is not processing the things that have occurred to them the year before. And her sister is obviously, I did like the fact that the sister points out like, hey, I'm mad at you that you were gone for 5 years and suddenly like you're in my life on a daily basis and you want me to process like the worst like night of my life.
Her mother is still alive, right?
Yeah, mother, it was supposed to be like the mom has stopped talking to the younger sister because the younger sister is talking to the older sister and like all that stuff. And so Sam is going to therapy, and for some reason she's been going for therapy for a whole year, and the therapist is like, hey, I really need you to open up to me.
You're like, what have you been talking about for a year? Like the Ghostface murders weren't one of the first things that you discussed.
Like he's like, you've been coming here for a year, you've been dancing around everything. You need to tell me what's going on. And she does, and the dude is kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna call the police. And it's like this weird.
He's a terrible therapist.
Yeah, he's a terrible therapist. Where it's sort of like how she explains, like, no, I killed my ex-boyfriend out of self-defense, and now everybody thinks that like I killed him. There's all these theories online.
Well, yeah, because it's after the events of Scream 2022. It's that because is it publicly known that she's Billy Loomis's daughter?
Yeah. Like,
okay. Yeah.
Like, came out and like.
And so they think that the two people blamed for the murders in that movie were patsies, and that Sam set it up so it made it look like they were the murders, even though you have like Gail Weathers and Sidney Prescott were both present and back up Sam's story. Like, it's just so they would also have to be in on this conspiracy to protect a murderer.
Yeah, and it's like this also, so she tells the therapist this. She pulls out her phone to show him all of this, like to just be like, no, I'm not lying. And that's when he's, like, you're fired as a client. I'm calling the police, which is, if you've ever gone to therapy, or even if you watch something like even Sopranos has showed you, like when like the therapist is like, don't tell me if you killed anybody, don't tell me that you want to kill anybody, because like it's supposed to be if you are wanting to harm someone.
It feels like they've never had a conversation before, but she's been going to therapy for a year.
Yes, and it's like this weird thing, like because she's like, oh well, like, but she's like, but no, I'm fine. I haven't been hallucinating anyone or seeing anything. So you almost want to hit pause to just be like, hold up. Does he know that she has seen things in the past? Like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, she hasn't disclosed pretty much anything to her therapist.
Weird thing that apparently the therapist didn't know anything, but however, the fact that she is living in New York with her sister who's going to school in New York,
and their two friends, Chad and Mindy, the twins, Randy Meeks's niece and nephew, and they all live together with another roommate.
No, they don't all live together.
Doesn't Mindy live with them?
I think,
or is it just Sam, her sister, and then the other roommate?
The other roommate, okay. And it's all over the place, because if, like, I don't know how much older Sam is supposed to be.
I think she's supposed to be like about 23. So she left when she was 18.
Yeah. And for her to be hanging out with them.
She doesn't really have like friends her own age.
Yeah.
Other than there's like the potential love interest neighbor.
Which is a fucking
it never really goes anywhere and that guy has like weird vibes as an actor.
Weird thing that he, like, to me, I'm like, okay,
he looks like a drug addict.
Yeah, he's not like attractive enough for me to be like, you know what, I can forgive the bad acting because he's supposed to be super
he's a very skeevy looking
like he's like, and it turns out like they've been secretly hooking up.
Well, I think it's like they wanted him to be a potential suspect for Ghostface, so they had to cast someone who had that air, but then, like, spoilers, he's not Ghostface.
Yeah, and there's never a moment where like they accuse him. It's also this really funny thing that what I loved is that at some point in the film, like, he's gonna like go with them to whatever place, and she's like, hold up, you told me not to trust anybody, and unfortunately I can't trust you right now. And he's like, all right, baby, it's okay, baby.
Yes, the dialogue is his choices as an actor are weird. He seems like a real like scuzzy player guy.
Guy that is like has reformed himself to be a good guy.
He seems like
found the most damaged woman.
He seems like a guy that would like invest in crypto and NFTs. That's the guy. And like smoking on a vape and things like that. Yeah.
Gaslight you the moment you told.
Oh yeah. He'd be like, I didn't see any Ghostface, baby. You're crazy.
And
what do you think of the change of scenery? Because that's the most radical thing about the movie is instead of Woodsboro or like a small town, or I guess we were in Hollywood in Scream 3, New York City as a setting for this story.
I was okay with it. I feel like I don't know if like they fully, like, at the end of the day they had to make a reason for them to be in one stationary place in a building being chased off because that is the rules. Like, I like the fact that there is a moment like in the subway where it's supposed to be like they got attacked on the subway. That made it interesting.
It creates new set pieces.
Because like in New York, it's supposed to be like, oh, it's Halloween in New York, which this is the other weird thing.
How many?
We're just like, how long does Halloween
Because the opening of the movie, it's night, and there are people walking around in costumes, and multiple days pass, and every night there's people walking around in costumes, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess it's a big city and there's lots of Halloween parties, but not this many people going to Halloween parties every night.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be like Sam is overprotective of her younger sister and is upset that she went to a frat party, and like it's just and like their roommate is just like they're being like she's like always sleeping around with people, but it's like, oh no, she's sex positive, guys.
Yeah, it felt very like fellow kids.
Yeah, and it was also like at the beginning of the film, they psych you out.
Well, that's the Scream thing, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, when a Scream movie opens,
out now versus compared to what they did before, which would be like, oh no, it turns out you're just watching a movie in this universe.
Well, with this, it's like we have someone who gets targeted and killed by Ghostface, and then they immediately reveal who Ghostface is.
Yeah,
and that it's a duo. But then that Ghostface gets murdered by another Ghostface.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, okay. And we never really get, or at least, I mean, I zoned out a lot during this movie because there was a lot of talking about shit that is not interesting. And like, I don't ever feel that they had a strong explanation, or maybe they did because the whole film is just exposition. It's just people walking into a space and then explaining a thing to you, and then there's like a set piece where Ghostface shows up, and then in the aftermath somebody finds a clue, and then there's exposition to explain something. It felt very like almost like a bad tabletop campaign or something.
There were masks left behind, and it turns out it was connected to another killer, so it was like they were doing this weird countdown and of like, you know, to when the killers were going to be revealed.
Did you feel that like the set pieces, because like, okay, let's say the story, who gives a shit, it's a Scream movie, it's the same story every time. So we had like the two set pieces I remember very vividly are the ladder apartment sequence, and then there's the subway sequence with Mindy.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess the big finale is a set piece, right? But other than that, there aren't really that many kill set pieces in the movie.
No. And I think it's so
what did you think of those sequences? Did you feel tension while you were watching them, or did you just kind of feel like, I know who's gonna die in this scene?
It didn't feel like tension because it just felt like anyone who was going to die felt very disposable at the end of the day.
I mean, very few people die in this movie.
Kind of like prolonging like the pain of it, which like they're trying to make it more realistic of it being blood's gushing.
Well, that's like with these like fucked up Terrifier movies and all this. It's this trend now to have this like misery horror.
So the one thing that I wanted to touch on again, it's supposed to be like, so Sam's reputation has been like slaughtered apparently. Like she's working
via the internet.
Yeah, via the internet. She's working these two crappy jobs, which also makes it fucking weird that her therapist didn't know shit about what was going on. Like
what did she sit there in silence every session?
Yeah, fucking damn
very weird.
And thinking about it now, I know that they would have never done this, but it would have been an interesting thing of maybe touching about the fact that she is like half Mexican and this white boy is being idolized and saying that like, oh no, like he didn't do the murders, he was framed. And then like you get to the point that you meet the roommate. The roommate has a cop that's a dad, like
played by Dermot Mulroney, not Dylan McDermott.
Yeah, and then like there's a mention like, oh no, her brother died. And like so there's all these like domino like these things to be knocked over later.
It feels like they're obviously telling you who Ghostface is in this movie.
Yeah, but then
and all you have to do is pay attention to what they're saying.
They go around and then shift things because it's supposed to be like that. Oh, you thought you knew, but you didn't. And like Mindy is the one that ends up like detailing everything, right?
Well, she's the Randy of this
and
version,
like
yeah.
it's this weird,
And I like that actress.
like that's the weird thing.
She's the only part I like about the
hate
movie.
That actress, but God, was she annoying in the other one that she was in? That like the first time we meet her, because she's just supposed to be like, oh, there's no way that I'm going to get like in this film. She's like, I'm not gonna get attacked at a party. It's kind of like being hit by thunder.
When I also feel like other than Jenna Ortega, but like Melissa Barrera and Jasmine Savoy Brown, who plays Mindy, like Melissa Barrera is 32 and Jasmine Savoy Brown is 29.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it would actually be more interesting to have Scream when it's about, adults rather than people who are like barely into adulthood, because at least you'd have people that have a different way of thinking, because we've already kind of done the high school college thing that's been done.
Yeah.
And then we got to like where they were adults, but then you have Scream 4 where we have to throw a bunch of high school kids in again. And then last Scream movie, we had to go back to high school again.
Yeah, I think it's just like this weird thing. It's also like trying to get the new generation into this franchise, but it's also like, but now we have to do like these like meta commentaries on it.
Oh no,
how, like,
the meta commentary is just so obnoxious at this point, because it's like it would be more interesting for them to subvert that in the next movie and it not be meta. Just make it a very earnest, straightforward slasher movie, and then the audience would be shocked because you'd be thinking there's going to be a twist. Like, no, there's no twist.
I think it's just getting to the point that it's just like the franchise needs to die.
Well, yeah, I don't really know what else there is to do with it.
Because there's no way to actually continue the franchise to then suddenly be like, we're not doing this anymore. And then there's like commentary in the film of like what it's like, have like the fact that we've made the like, because it's supposed to be that is their real life, but they've made films based on their real life.
Well, that's somebody pointed out on Reddit where they were saying there's actually a really dark undertone to the universe of the Scream movies, because these people's like personal tragedy has been turned into like a media machine with books, and you're saying movies, and
it could be like they could be making a comment on true crime. Like,
I'm surprised they haven't done. I was gonna say, I'm surprised they haven't had a podcast. Gail should have a podcast.
Talking about podcasts and like how that affects people, because a lot of people who are relatives of true crime, which we have series, we have movies,
HBO miniseries,
docu-series where the families are like, please stop doing this, stop making it to fiction, or stop making these documentaries without our permission, because you are ignoring the pain that they've gone through. Like there's relatives of the killer,
Jeffrey
Dahmer. They came out to be like, hey, he killed a lot of Black and people of color who happen to be gay, and that's never touched upon, because all we talk about is how hot he was,
or just how like fucked up he was, or like he kept their body parts in a fridge, like the sensationalizing of it. Here's an idea for a Scream movie. The Ghostface killer is a family member of a victim who's going after the people who are exploiting the murder in media. That's something like they really haven't touched on. They've often talk about media in the movies, but that's not an angle we've ever seen.
Yeah, and so like they just copy the events of, for example, of Gail getting punched because she exploited the whole thing and made a book about it, which is like this. I think it's just, at what point do people not realize that Gail is a fucking horrible person if she's obviously unable to learn from her past mistakes, when she's sort of like, oh, we have this really fucked up version of a family, guys, we've all like survived the ghost killer, but she keeps fucking making like money off of the tragedy.
But we're still supposed to like her and be on her side, and it's just very confusing. And so we talk about this is a legacy sequel, of course. So we do have Gail Weathers. Neve Campbell reportedly would not come back until she was paid more, and they refused to pay her, so she said she wouldn't be in the movie. So she's just, which is weird, because in the last movie we find out she lives in New York City, and this movie is set in New York City. So you think
she just went into hiding.
Yeah. But then we have Skeet Ulrich appears briefly as the ghost of Billy Loomis.
So rough. It is.
He doesn't look good.
Doesn't good, and it's like this weird thing where his face looks puffy, even though it's supposed to be just in reflection.
But it's just he's an old dude now, and he's not a high school kid, but he's supposed to be the ghost of high school Billy Loomis.
It's like why can't you just cast an actor who like
does he have a son?
Like looks like him, do a deep fake, and then go like, hey, Skeet, can you just like voice this?
Yeah.
He'll be like, okay.
Because it's with the transparency and all that, because it's always like in the reflection of a window. Yeah, you have enough distortion that you could hide the flaws if it was a deep fake. The other big, I guess, legacy character that returns is Hayden Panettiere as Kirby from Scream 4, who I believe she dies in that movie, and there's never a mention that she's still alive. I don't remember her still being alive.
No, there was no show that she was still alive.
But do they retcon that in this movie? I think they like explain it away.
Kind of did, but
she's an FBI agent now.
She's an FBI agent, and they're supposed to be the whole switcheroo thing. So here's the thing that like the point at the end. It's supposed to be that for some reason the killer has a building in fucking New York, which like even in this fake like fantasy of it, everybody is sort of like, yes, it is fucking expensive to live in New York. That is why
it's like, how do they own a building? Is it the most run-down neighborhood in all of New York City?
Building that the two prior like former killers that they caught
who were college students. Did they inherit it?
And it's supposed to be like they were like rich kids, and like that's where
how rich
was, and like they had it was all the collections of the former killers, which you kind of think of it being like you think, how did these masks and knives go out into the public?
Because it would have been like police evidence lockers. And there's never an explanation, I don't think, of how they got them, is it?
Like, it's in the Scream universe, is there like a point in time that instead of
like are the police auctioning evidence?
They auction shit out because they're like,
I could see like estate auctions when there's like a drug dealer who has like a bunch of nice cars, but the actual outfit worn by the murderer, that seems a little fucked up.
Cop dad is sort of like, no, like Kirby, I called the FBI. Kirby's been like on leave for like 2 months ago, like because she's gone crazy, and like
so we're all. But then like there's no motivation there. Like, why would Kirby be the Ghostface killer and go? I guess it's supposed to be that Kirby believes the conspiracies about Sam. But then what does that have to do with Kirby? Because Kirby, the Ghostface that killed Kirby in Scream 4, but apparently didn't, it's fucking related to Sydney.
Yeah.
What does it have to do with, it has nothing to do with Billy Loomis.
Know each other because Kirby was supposed to be like in senior year when like Sam was in freshman year. Like, so they're supposed to be like only a few, I don't know. Like
that timeline does not make sense.
Just like, or I don't, it's so weird.
They knew of each other.
Like they knew of each other, and then it's like so there's never a moment where Kirby's kind of like side-eyeing Sam or just being like, hey, does your sister have any fucking weird situation? None of that for us to be like, oh yeah, maybe it is Kirby. But I think what I remember from the movie that Kirby was in, it was like, it seemed like the last 10 minutes we gave her the personality of being a movie buff. Because it just like she just seemed like a normal.
It was.
Like,
I think it was like that
teenager.
final set piece of Scream 4 where they are like all having a party, which is once again a reference to the first movie.
Yeah,
where they're watching horror movies,
and like that's when she's rattling off all these information, and she turns out like she's kind of having a crush on the nerdy like horror kid, only for him to.
He's one of the killers,
secret back killers, and being like, "How dare you like me now?"
But like, it's. My question for this now is, where does this franchise even go at this point that would make the next movie close to, like, to redeem it? Because let's say maybe there's a chance you can redeem the Scream franchise. How? What would you do? My only idea, I think, would be they keep hinting that Sam is going to take up after Billy. So just literally have her be Ghostface and make it from her point of view. We know who Ghostface is the entire time. And it's just maybe 2 points of view, her and her sister is trying to figure out who's the Ghostface killer and ends up being her Sam. And like, she has to kill Sam at the end.
Or just like maybe have that you have someone who's starting to become a ghost killer, but she hunts them down, but takes it too far where she's killing people left and right to get to that.
Let's do Dexter.
But it's it's I think that's the hard part of this, because you made it kind of interesting by the film before this, where she goes overboard stabbing her boyfriend.
And they just kind of repeat that here.
And like in this one, I did find it interesting that like, oh, she like her smiling, like she does so well doing that creepy, like I'm enjoying this kind of thing. But I almost wish that they had emphasized, which is so bad because we're just referring to her as her sister. Jenna Ortega's character.
I don't give a shit.
Kills someone else by stabbing them like through the mouth. And it looks for a second that she's enjoying it.
But she's not related to Billy Loomis.
But it's also like this weird thing, like, you know.
Are they going to make their mother the Ghostface killer in the next fucking movie or something?
And like she's about to kill like the last of the killers, and it looks like she might have empathy, but then her sister looks at her like, really? And she's like, well, you fucked with family. And then death.
It's and then there's too many death fake outs in this movie. You'll see someone get stabbed multiple times, and then it's like, oh, they're in the hospital and they're stabilized, or they're okay now and they show up, and you're like, well, the last time I saw them, it looked like they got pretty fucked up. This recovery is pretty quick.
Yeah, I think it also kind of does a disservice when you think about like the first few Scream films, because like we see like first time we see Sydney, she's going through the fact that like her mom was killed. And then the second time we see her, she's trying to kind of like rebuild her life in college. And then the third time we see her, she is a recluse. She is working.
It's because the media around the Woodsboro killings is too much.
She's living the best life of having the remote job of my dreams.
Well, wasn't she like a mental health counselor?
Yeah, she's like a mental health counselor. She has a dog. So she lives in the most private place ever.
She has like security cameras up everywhere.
And then when they continue it,
Scream 4, they just erase all of that.
Scream 4 is supposed to be like, oh, she wrote a book to like let herself be. She's gonna restart her life on her terms, only for her niece to turn out to be like a killer because she's like, I want attention, and you're like, okay.
Because like, it's more and more the justifications behind why the Ghostface killers are doing what they do are being stretched so thin.
Yeah,
that it just feels like, because even this one felt like a rehash of Scream 2, where it's like revenge for a thing that happened in a previous movie. We've already done that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, now there's 3 ghost faces. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Like, and there's nothing inventive about it anymore. It just feels that it's become the thing the first Scream movie was kind of making fun of.
Yeah, and it's also like, when you think about like the reality of how dark it is the fact that the manufacturers of these masks did not go, hey guys, we're gonna stop making
them. You'd think there'd be like, you know, the Federal Trade Commission or something would say, yeah, you're just not allowed to make paraphernalia related to, you know, serial killers. Yeah, that would just be wrong. You can't do that.
If they halted making of it, but you have like some weird like, you know, underground of like people who sell them, and therefore like it becomes more selective on people who just buy it just to be assholes.
Well, and also people know who Sam is and the people around her, right?
Yeah.
So if you're around them and you see someone walking around in a Ghostface costume, I'd be like, I think there's about to be a murder, guys, because these people are here, and I just saw Ghostface go upstairs at this Halloween party. So I think we probably need to go up to that guy and ask him to remove his mask just so we can check and everybody can be clear.
A few people on the subway that had it, and you had one that had like multicolors on it, but you just it like
the Pride Ghostface, which is a real weird like.
Like how they made Babadook a gay icon.
Yeah. Ghostface is for non-binary people or something. I don't know.
But it's one that you're just kind of like, it's forgettable at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, it's very boring.
That you do.
I was bored out of my fucking mind watching this movie.
It's like I think about like the last Halloween movie, which we did not like.
At least there was something interesting.
Like, you know, like Laurie had gone through extreme therapy.
Well, it's the worst part of that last Halloween movie is more the last 15 minutes of it.
It's because it was 2 films meshed into one.
Yeah.
Like one that was supposed to be a sexy
but at least
killer.
It was doing something different with Michael Myers, as opposed to this, which is just we just copy pasted a lot of things from other Scream movie scripts and then put it in New York, and that's like the difference.
I almost want to congratulate other franchises that are like, we're just gonna make it some supernatural demon shit, because at this point, that's what I'm praying for. I mean, they're kind of doing it with Sam to being like, she sees her dead dad.
Well, I mean,
guys.
it's to justify the things that Ghostface is able to do at this point, it is bordering on supernatural.
Yeah, it is.
And especially owning that building in New York, that has to be supernatural. They made a deal with the devil. So would you recommend Scream 6 to anyone? No, not even if you're, I'd say if you enjoyed the first Scream movie, just rewatch that. And maybe watch Scream 2. That one's pretty okay. I like Scream 3 because of Parker Posey. But after that, there's really no reason to watch any of them.
Parker Posey by some miracle.
Yes. If you can bring back Kirby, who I swear we saw die on screen in Scream 4, you can bring back Parker Posey and make her the Ghostface killer.
Said she wants to come back.
All right, well, we're back, and we'll be talking about a movie that's garnered some controversy lately, which is How to Blow Up a Pipeline, based on the nonfiction book of the same name by climate activist Andreas Malm. This film synopsis goes as follows. With the climate crisis at a dangerous point of no return, a group of brave environmental activists come up with a daring plan to make their voices heard and disrupt an oil pipeline. It is a very pro-eco-terrorism movie, which was kind of a big surprise. What did you think of How to Blow Up a Pipeline, Ariana?
I thought that it is one of the few films that was a daring attempt to show what is necessary to get shit done. It's a quiet film there in ways that, like, there's not a lot of dialogue going on. There's not a lot of exposition.
It's a lot of process.
Yes. So I'm wondering if you know why it is like such a controversial thing. I mean,
well, I mean, it's a film that the end statement of the movie is that destroying the mechanisms of industry that are destroying the planet is justifiable.
Yeah.
Because it is an act of self-defense. Like they say in the movie, this is an act of self-defense. Is what's happened. Apparently, I think it maybe had some sort of exclusivity with AMC theaters, but there were certain AMC franchises that refused to program it in their schedule because of its message, which I think it's a tricky place, because anytime you have something being touted as radical and it's a mainstreamish thing, I mean, this is still like an indie movie. It's just gotten, I think Neon put it out, who'd also did like Parasite and Barbarian. So it's one of those where, like, is it, because when you're going into it, I'm thinking, is it going to be as radical as I want it to be, or is it eventually going to cop out and like try to do some sort of centrist third way bullshit? And it does not.
No.
And what I loved most about it is there is this subplot where it really looks like one member of the group is an informant to the feds, and how the movie handles that and the reveal at the end in regards to that, I think is one of the most perfect displays of what solidarity looks like in revolutionary movements.
Yeah.
And I was so worried about that plot point and where it was going to go, and maybe how it was going to justify, turning on your own group, but it doesn't do that. And it also doesn't punish those characters either, which I thought was another way you could go, which I wouldn't like either. It shows that this group is smarter than the federal people who are going after them. And it's because the people in this group are all on the same page. There's never, like, unexpected things happen, but they recover from them and they're successful in the end.
Yeah, they're also successful because I think they show in the film that they, at least the people who start this, are very clear about not becoming too emotionally attached to one another.
Yeah, there's not a group of friends.
Yeah, like they hang out, and whoever has a strong connection to each other, they have it, but they do not bring it up when they are together, which is a hard thing to do, especially when the people are going to make the sacrifices that they're willing to make.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of this, you have some of them go to federal prison because someone has to stay behind and take credit for it, so that a very clear, cogent message can be presented.
So like,
well, I would say it's interesting in the way it does character development because it's a non-linear film. We have the group already assembled, going to a place in Texas where they're putting together the bombs, and the whole plan is to blow up part of an oil pipeline. And they've taken into account the way the oil flows, so they will even blow it in a way that doesn't leak too much oil into the environment. So they're being super conscious of what they're doing. It's like the least amount of collateral damage done. The goal is they don't want to kill anyone. It's to destroy the machinery, right? And so the film uses flashback as our way of character development, because none of these people are going to talk to each other in detail. There's not going to be a scene where they sit around and like, why are you here? They don't need to have that conversation. So through the flashbacks, we have Ariella Barrera, who plays Soshi, I believe is the way you pronounce that name. She is also a co-producer and co-writer on the film as well. And so she has a relationship with Sean from college. But then we have other characters, and then she also works with Theo, who's played by Sasha Lane, who is the only person. Sasha Lane and then Jake Weary were the only two actors that I recognized in the movie that I had seen before. I'd seen him in It Follows.
Yeah.
But I really liked the use of flashbacks because they're also withholding some information in regards, especially to Logan and Rowan. They're sort of your typical Portland like crust punks type characters,
protest punks, behavior. I really did like their development, but I liked, for example, that Jake Weary, who plays Dwayne, they're about to all have dinner. He happens to have like deer or some type of like game, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna cook this. He turns to Logan and Rowan, and Logan goes, I'm a vegetarian. Rowan goes, I'm a vegan. But they don't have this dialogue where they're telling that guy like, hey, you're a fucking redneck for eating meat.
Or
they're just like,
and he doesn't say anything shitty to them either.
No.
It's just he goes, oh, okay.
Like he was just like quiet. And that's kind of what you expect. I mean, Dwayne plays a character that I feel like is close to the character that was in I forgot the name of it. It was one of your top films, Jordan Peele movie.
Nope.
Yeah.
Daniel Kaluuya's character.
It's that quiet farmer who's like,
he's not an activist, but this is directly harming his family.
Yeah.
So he becomes an activist, that's the thing people don't seem to understand. And we don't really have it outlined in popular media, is people don't just become activists out of boredom or fun, because it's not an exciting, fun thing to do. It's people become activists out of a conviction.
Yeah.
If you're going to be an effective activist, at least you do it out of a conviction. You have personally been touched. People you care about have been touched by a systemic wrong. And so you realize you have to take action because the system is not going to correct itself.
Yeah.
And so Dwayne's character, you remember what the justification is? It just there's sickness that's happened to his family as a result?
What it was is that basically like the farm that he owned
basically
was like a place that they could retrieve oil from, but his family had owned it for over 100 years.
They just used the federal government to take it.
The federal government took it by saying it was public property that needed to be used. So they didn't even pay him.
It was that eminent domain thing where they can just come in and take it
from him. And so now, because of like the drilling for oil, like the water is contaminated, that they can't drink water from the faucet.
I mean, it's a very real life scenario for people that live in these places.
His like mother-in-law's house. Because of that, like they lost their property, and so they have nowhere else to go.
And so he's of all the people, he's one that's very unlikely to be involved. But the movie never dwells on. We have a lot of these college students, people that are activists. because I feel like there's another character that parallels Dwayne in Michael, who's indigenous.
Yeah.
And it's his mother dies of cancer. Is that correct? If I'm remembering, he has a family member who dies from illness or becomes sick.
I don't know if it's his mother.
No, because his mother disapproves of what he's doing.
Yeah.
She's trying to follow the like environmental way, like the way of defending the environment through procedure and process and all of the established political tools. And he's kind of come to the conclusion, watching his community get devastated, that these tools are inadequate.
Yeah,
like these aren't going to solve things because they invented these tools, and so they know all the loopholes of how to get around them.
Yeah, and so Michael will wander the prior property that belonged to his tribe and family to harass the people that are working there. And so it's that interesting thing that his mom tells him, like, what benefit are you getting from harassing the people that are working there? They're just working there. And it's just, he is at a dead end as to what to do with himself.
Well, and also that's one of these things where we always say, well, hey, it's just their job. But time and time again, it's the complicity of workers in acts that are evil is what keeps these things going. Like it's not just institutions, it's the society's complicity in upholding the institutions, because it's the whole, it's the system of propaganda, right? It's what we call common sense is more often than not the ideology that's promoted by mass media on the part of the establishment and is just inundated into people's brains from birth to death. So we all assume that's just the way things are because we aren't allowed to see anything outside of it. We don't imagine there can be anything out of it. That's one of the tools that they use to stop revolutionary movements is the destruction of imagination. Because if you can imagine anything different, you're just going to settle for what exists around you now.
Yeah.
What did you think? Because I'd say the most powerful emotional relationship in the movie would be between Theo and Aisha. Theo, played by Sasha Lane, who she has cancer.
Yeah.
And is terminal. Like it seems pretty clear that she's going to die.
She can't afford her medication. She's
and it's environmental pollution that's caused it.
Yeah, and her doctor tells her like it is common for people who live within this area to have it, and like cut to her staring at like it's like a I don't know what it is, like a plant that she lives nearby that's pumping out like
some sort of like oil refinery. Yeah. I think.
I thought it was very interesting because we don't really realize it until later in the film. We know that they're like in a relationship, but we just don't understand how deep that relationship is and how much do they understand what's going on. I thought it was her relationship with, I forgot like how does
Aisha, I think. Oh, Soshi?
With Soshi was, I think that was the most interesting connection because
they're co-workers, right?
They're really good friends because like she's there when Soshi's mother's funeral, and like she tells Soshi she was my mom too, and so they are best friends. They
but lives have gone in two very different directions.
Yeah, so was supposed to go to college. She is an environmental activist there, but only coming to the terms that like after her mother dies due to a heat wave.
Mm-hmm.
And she is with her environmental council, and she's just sort of like, we're not doing enough. We're not doing enough. People are already dying.
Because they're just pamphlets, protests. It's the same rigmarole you see
like,
all the time.
Finally got like this stuff done. Like we need to continue it. And she's like, and I think what's kind of like sad is like she's talking to them, but they are not reacting to her in a way. And that is something that like we've seen in the past, especially when it comes to white activists, because she's a Mexican woman. She's coming in with a certain type of pain, and they're looking at her like, oh, honey, I get it, but we can't process your pain right now because we got these pamphlets and
they're very much that sort of neoliberal ideology of, oh, we just have to work within the system, and the system is good, and the system will correct itself as long as we remind the system.
Well, I think,
but it's like, no, I think the institutions are well aware of what they're doing. They just simply don't care because they haven't been made to suffer any consequences as a result.
Well, I think it also is the consequences when we think about, and you and I have been in these scenarios where we've met people or we've participated in systems going like, oh, well, we'll disrupt the system from within.
Not possible.
But that's not possible, because what happens is the system gets a hold of you, and the pressures of life start accumulating. You need to start paying rent. You need to start doing this. Well, I need to save up because I need to buy blah, blah, blah. And so you are just accommodating to the system as much as possible.
And so the harm is normalized.
And so the harm is normalized. And so Soshi, who is just like, she drops out of college because she realizes like this isn't working.
It's a hindrance to the action that she needs to do.
And like when she tells Theo is at first angry because she's like, you dropped out of college, you know how important college was. And she's like, but why does it matter when the earth right now is going to collapse and I'm supposed to, and I want to change it, but I'm supposed to go through 4 years of college and then determine how much time I have left to try to fix it, when the person that mattered the most to me, the person that the reason why I went to college for, is gone. And they've died because of the environment. And she's like, and then I have to find out that my best friend is dying because of the environment. Like, I'm just supposed to take it. And like, when Theo does, like, and Aisha do come have that conversation at the end of the day, like, Aisha is complicit in the system. She is working at a nonprofit. She's working in.
She and Dwayne are like the most normie people in the movie.
She's working at a food bank and also like a soup kitchen feeding the homeless.
So she's doing very good things.
Yeah, and like the thing is like they do not have enough to feed the people there, and she's witnessing it right now because it has to do with the fact that like the way food banks work is getting the surplus that's out there, but
there's no surplus.
There's no surplus when the environment is fucked up. Because when the environment is fucked up, that means the sales go all over the place.
Well, it's also like the harvest is not as large as previously predicted. The people at the top are going to get their cut first before anyone else. So when you're getting to the homeless people, there ain't nothing left.
But when you think about also the cause and effect of COVID, when it comes to the purchasing powers that America has had, we look at the large difference, because even before we left to live in the Netherlands, whenever you went to the supermarket, there were still things that were gone, that were not there. The cheapest stuff that you could get were no longer there. Like people would like,
and this is pre-inflation.
This, when tensions start building up, suddenly there's no fucking toilet paper. Here, there has not been that fucking issue.
Flour.
Yeah, like here, like the most that we've ever seen, like the stuff empty had to do a distribution going on strike.
Yeah.
And so in the States, there is something going on. Well, where those below you.
Majority Report, Sam Cedar's show, he has a regular caller, Kowalski, who is from Nebraska and is a farmer, but also very much on like the political left. And he will talk about that regular people in America do not have a full comprehension of what the food supply chain is going to be looking like over the next 5 years. That harvests are being greatly reduced because unpredictable weather is happening, flooding of fields that destroys an entire year's worth of crops, too much heat that destroys all the crops, other factors that cause the harvest they do manage to get to be very underwhelming, smaller than expected, which means less money for the farmer. The farmer might have to go out of business. And inevitably, it just kind of leads more to the corporatizing of farms, even more than they already are, and they're incredibly corporatized. And also just less food for people. And they're not doing anything to adjust people's diets. There's a YouTuber I listen to and watch, Dan Giesling, contestant on Big Brother. People might recognize the name. He's a YouTuber I like because he very just positive, funny, dumb kind of guy.
Yeah.
But he was talking to his Twitch chat while he was playing, and about how he was going to the store and a steak was like $19. He lives in Michigan. And he was talking to one of his chatters who happened to work in a cattle farm and was like, oh, we can sell you meat wholesale. But I started to think of, here's an idea. You just don't eat beef anymore. Like that's the reality of the climate collapse that's happening. Is there's going to come a point where the food you want just ain't there anymore, and you have to deal with it, and you have to move on. And maybe you were eating too much of it in the first place. That's like the American appetite is so disproportionate to the global appetite that Americans waste so much food, which is another, I mean, you make a whole movie about that, right? Where there's so many people who go hungry and Americans just toss out literal tons of food a year.
Yeah, I mean, and there are people within the states and other areas that are trying to be more conscious about growing their own gardens, about like making their own food, but it is the lack of solidarity that there is at the end of the day. And it is especially scary when it comes to the states, because when you're trying to amplify mutual aid, it is so difficult to do because it feels like you need to run through certain hoops, and that like
well, there's also this weird, it's nonprofit has been perverted by the concepts of the free market.
Yeah.
So now it's like, well, I want to start a charity. Well, that charity already exists. You'll be in competition with that charity. Why would charities be in competition with each other? Aren't you all just trying to help people? So it's like, it's this insane thing of they basically turn charities into just businesses.
Well, yeah, that's what it is. I remember like the anger that incited when I worked in nonprofit when so-and-so started working on this, and like, but the grant went to so-and-so because they started including it on their program. And it's just like, it is
like, isn't the goal to help people?
It's heartbreaking, and it's also like this thing that I feel like it will confuse and anger people. There are a lot of efforts to right now to make connections, make everything like cross-functional as much as possible with some organizations, but it is disheartening at the end of the day to make poor people, working class people, have to run circles to get their needs met, like between different
well,
like nonprofits.
There's a lot of working class people that aren't aware that they're working poor. And it's because of the nature of the media and the way class isn't spoken about in the United States that no, most people, you want to go, no, you're poor. That's why you seem to struggle all the time, because you think you're not poor, but you are. And being poor isn't your fault. People clearly are busting their asses working in the States for nothing.
Yeah.
And so I think that was part of the Soshi character. It was sort of having watched her mother probably go through that, busting her ass her whole life, working to provide for her family, only to become sick due to circumstances that could have been prevented, but were out of her mother's control.
Or just die from a heat wave.
Yeah. It's
that could have been prevented.
It's like, and so it's this sense of helplessness. And the film is very good in showing you, well, you're not necessarily helpless. The actions you might need to take in order to affect change will jeopardize your freedom. But I would question, are you free anyway in a world where a heat wave can pop up and just kill you anyway? Not really that free in the first place.
Yeah.
Where so much of your life is outside your own dictates, right? Someone else gets to make these decisions for you. I'd say it's not the best in terms of narrative. It's like, it's the amount of character development you would need. And it's based on a nonfiction book. So I like that it had a nonfiction feel to it a little bit.
Yeah.
Because of the emphasis on the process of just, Michael is the one who is sort of the explosives expert. He's the one who's read up about like the right chemicals you would need, mixtures, ratios.
That is experimenting, and it's supposed to be everybody's connected through Soshi.
Mm-hmm.
And she's the one that contacts Michael because he's experimenting on, like,
he's like recording videos.
He's recording on TikTok, essentially, on Bomb Talk, like, because it's like that version of TikTok of what he's been doing. She contacts him, asks him if he's willing to participate in it. He says yes. Theo, she already knows him because they're best friends. She knows Sean from school. Sean ends up communicating with Dwayne because the school is making a documentary about people being affected.
And he also meets Logan and Rowan.
Yeah.
I think,
through like they're making a documentary, and Dwayne's like, why are you doing this? And they're like, oh, we're just they can't offer the money, they're just documenting it for the documentation's sake.
Yeah.
And so Sean is brave enough to come back after like Dwayne is consoling his wife who's crying about what's been going on because they're stressed out.
And was she pregnant, or was there a child involved? I can't remember.
There is a child, like they have a daughter together.
Okay.
And like he goes to a bookstore and pulls out how to blow up a pipeline. And that's how he meets Logan and Rowan, because Logan sees what he's reading and he's like, hey, they're not really going to teach you how to blow up a pipeline. And that's when they're both of them realize, like, without really saying out loud, we both know what we're talking about. We need to become friends to like help each other out.
When I'd say in terms of like the filmmaking style, I was reminded a lot of Safdie brothers.
Yeah.
Like Good Time and Uncut Gems. It has that kind of like energy to it.
Yeah. Which is like, it's one of these things that like I really like this film, but I know like when I've watched a few interviews with the Safdie brothers, they would probably be like, it's a political film, so it's not something that we would probably.
They probably would still have things to say they like about it. It's just not the kind of movie they would make.
Yeah, because they're not.
They're more just about people in general and the human condition, which I would argue is political. Like, to be a human alive on this planet is a political thing at this point, but it always kind of has been.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, it's surprising that it was made. It is very surprising.
I'm shocked that they actually got this made. Because big surprise, they blow up a pipeline, and the movie in the right frames this as the correct thing to happen. And
they also they in a way show that they got away with everything that they wanted to get away with.
And they did it because they were smart. It wasn't random. It wasn't reactionary, right? That wasn't just, and all of them could have easily been reactionaries. They were all wronged in some way by the system. But instead of just reacting in anger, they took a deep breath, they calmed down, they articulated their goals, they identified a process that could help them achieve that goal.
Yeah.
They made sure that solidarity held everyone together. And that was one of my favorite moments of the movie, is when the feds get it all thrown in their fucking face and they win. It's like one of the happiest endings of a movie in a long time.
It's also because they made it very clear, like, who was going to be sacrificed and why.
Yeah, and it wasn't like, we're not just going to do this and we'll all be happy and free.
And because it's like, so she has a difficult conversation with Aisha, who is like angry, who's like, what the fuck? Why are you doing this? Da, da, da. And she's just sort of like, what do you expect us to do?
Just die?
Like, and because though she's like, I'm willing to do it, but it's also like this thing of like, well, if Theo gets arrested, Theo's medication gets paid for by the government.
Yeah.
Because Theo's having problems paying for her fucking medication in order to live.
And so it's like, use the system against itself.
Yeah. And so she's like, if we show that we are young and we're willing, and it was just us that managed to do this, more people will step up and do it. And so it is like, an Aisha, she's very clear as to why her anger and why she doesn't want to participate in it, but she ends up participating it because she realizes, like, if not, then she's going to lose Theo in a way she doesn't want to lose Theo.
I think it does a good job of, we understand every character in this movie.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do anything where it's like, oh, but let's get to know the people who work on the oil pipeline. We don't need to know.
But
we don't need to know them.
I like the fact that, like, any conflict that they have between each other is quickly resolved.
Yep.
Because Zoshi is so like, this has been a decision, and she's basically like doing the thing that sometimes is very important to do, like during a revolutionary time. Like, I'm sorry, it's a dictatorship for this current moment.
Well, yeah, it's like, this isn't about we're all friends. This is about we all have a shared belief and goal in mind.
Yeah.
And we don't have to like each other, but we have to respect each other and we have to get the job done. It reminded me of Harlan County, USA, the documentary about the coal miners' strike.
Yeah.
In Kentucky. And there's that scene where it's the wives of the miners are getting into this like a personal back and forth thing because one lady slept with another lady's husband. And then they have that.
It's more like about flirting or
Yeah.
the fact that like
Yeah.
some of them are like
It's petty grievance.
petty grievance.
And we have that one woman who steps forward and just explains to them, like, I don't care about a man. I care about my kids. That's who I care about. And I'm doing this in order to make a better world for my children. So whatever grief you have with each other, this is not the time to bring that out. You can settle that another time. We have a goal here, which is to push the community forward. And I think that's something that's very hard to get everyone on the same page in America, is this isn't about you. This is about everybody. And you're part of that. And you don't need to be spotlighted. You don't need to be coddled. You need to get with the program or you're going to get left behind. And the funny thing is, the benefits that come from revolution, you're still going to get whether you were a part of it or not.
Yeah, I mean, like in that documentary, there was also the remark that the men needed to step up because the women were doing the most of the protesting. And the men like came together and they were like, hey, our wives, our daughters, our sisters are shaming us by showing up when we are not showing up. And it is also the fact that like we have to realize within the fact that people have bringing in identity policies, one of the issues that happens with it, which I was wanting to verbalize, is like we now are getting to the point that because of the identity politics, we need certain leaders or groups to be saints. And that is a fucking problem at the end of the day, because then they're just going to pull out the Twitter handler from when so-and-so, when they were like 16 and, you know, use a racial slur and not even practice social justice when this is a part of the situation. Is like, it's sort of like, we have to get shit done. I don't care if so-and-so uses racial slur at 16 years old. I can't dwell on it when the planet is fucking dying, when people are fucking like needing food and they're not getting it.
The prioritization of urgency. The most urgent thing right now is because the thing is, climate collapse is happening. We missed the window of stopping it. It's happening. It's going to happen. So the goal now is let's brace for impact and let's try to diminish the intensity of climate collapse when it fully hits. What can we preserve of what we have? And more often than not, the Western ideology is reactive. It's not proactive. It's, well, afterwards we do something about it. And the thing is, this is one thing that afterwards, there ain't going to be fucking much you can do about it.
Yeah, because our policymakers are too wrapped up upon themselves and celebrity. And the thing is, like, they're going to be comfy cozy no matter what fucking happens to them. It's the people on the ground that are going to be affected by it. Like, they get to move and leave wherever they fucking want. But when you have people going through it, it is completely different. When I think about environmental collapse, I constantly think about my family back in Puerto Rico. Like, my mom does have PTSD after Maria, because I remember one time the lights went out. She had had electricity for over a full year, but the electricity went out and she called me not knowing what to do with herself because she was scared that it was just going to be gone for another month. And that is what happens to people. And it is terrifying because when your government doesn't do anything, you're left to be on your own. And a lot of people came together and did great things together. But there are people out there that because the chaos is there, they will rip each other apart because that's what they're used to. They're used to having gas.
They're used to hyper individualization.
Yeah, and it's just sort of like, and it's sad because it's like, I don't want that for my homeland. I don't want it, but they left the infrastructure such a shitty thing, and we're seeing it in the States. Blizzards go through. Texas is never ready when blizzards go through.
Texas isn't ready for hot weather or cold weather at this point.
What did they do? Like when your sister came and she was like, it was summer, and they told her like, oh yeah, rolling blackouts are going to be happening, by the way, guys. But you know, certain neighborhoods were still going to have their electricity, just not the lower class neighborhoods.
We're like, here's a radical idea. Maybe humans aren't meant to live in every environment like Arizona. Maybe that's just not a place where humans get to live, in big cities with plumbing and electricity, because the devastation to the environment is too much. And maybe not everybody should own a vehicle. We should have, sustainable, green energy powered mass transit. But I feel like the odds of that happening in my lifetime in the United States are 0 to 0. And so a movie like How to Blow Up a Pipeline is about positing the ideas for a people who have no other options left. This is the option.
Yeah.
And it also doesn't soften the sacrifice of it. It's, people will be punished as a result. That's just the way the system works. So it's not telling people you're bad if you aren't willing to do it. They're saying somebody's got to do it, and the people who do it are going to have to be sacrificed in some way. Would you recommend How to Blow Up a Pipeline? I also want to play an hour and 40 minutes, so it's right in Papa Daddy Seth's sweet spot in terms of runtime. Hour and a half, and it gets everything across that it needs to. So you're giving it a recommendation?
Giving it a recommendation.
I would give it a recommendation. I would say give the movie a chance if you start it and you don't immediately feel that it's stimulating you as much as a Marvel movie. It's a good movie. There's good characters. It's well written. It's well paced. And I love the structure of it. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Make sure to check out our show notes for relevant links, including links to our website, popcult.blog. If you go over there, we post every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and more on the weekends. Also, make sure to subscribe wherever it is you listen to podcasts, so you'll be notified when new episodes of this show are posted. If you do visit popcult.blog, you'll find that right now we're doing a series called The American Theater on Film, where we're going through and watching some of the great American plays in the best filmed versions that exist of them. Coming up, we'll have reviews of Eugene O'Neill's Long Day's Journey into Night, David Mamet's Glengarry Glen Ross, and Angels in America, among others. If you enjoy what we do here on the podcast and over on the blog, we'd like you to consider supporting us on Patreon. We've got lots of different reward levels there that give you access to different things. We have bonus podcasts that we do over there, and polls you can vote in, all sorts of things. I'd like to thank our Patreons. We have Morphine, who is at our sneak preview level, and also Becca and Matt, who are both at our writer's room level. And until next time, keep listening.